She wasn't supposed to even touch a rifle that day. Just a quiet range assistant, setting up targets for elite SEALs, invisible, background noise. When every sniper failed to hit the impossible target, frustration filled the air. Then, without warning, one SEAL handed her his weapon. The team froze, some smirking, others annoyed. She took position without a word. One breath. One shot. The distant plate rang out, hit dead center. Their faces changed from mockery to disbelief as they realized what they were witnessing. The truth was about to change everything. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more untold tales of extraordinary people hiding in plain sight. Raven Mercer arrived at the Fort Bragg sniper qualification range well before dawn, the military-issue truck bouncing along the rutted access road as she navigated by memory more than sight. The eastern sky showed only the faintest hint of gray, hours yet before sunrise would burn through the heavy Carolina mist that blanketed the grounds. Just how she preferred it. Alone, quiet. No eyes following her, no questions she couldn't answer. She parked near the equipment shed and began her morning routine with practiced efficiency. The weathered key stuck in the lock momentarily before yielding with a familiar grind of metal. Inside, she collected the steel target plates, range flags, and scoring equipment, loading everything onto the utility cart with methodical precision. 8 months into this job, and she could perform these tasks blindfolded. Sometimes she wished the work demanded more of her. But that wasn't why she had chosen this position. As she drove the cart down the range, Raven placed wind flags at 100-yard intervals. Her fingers detected subtle shifts in the air currents that most would miss, automatically calculating adjustments a shooter would need to make. Old habits. The knowledge remained even when she no longer used it, muscle memory that refused to fade despite her best efforts. The targets came next. 8 steel plates positioned at increasing distances, from 400 yards to the final plate at an extreme 1,500 yards. That last one was cruel, she thought, particularly in today's conditions. The early morning fog would linger in the valley, making the distant target nearly invisible, a near impossible shot for anyone but the most skilled marksman, and even they would struggle today. As she secured the final plate, her radio crackled to life. Range assistant, acknowledge. The voice belonged to Master Chief Donovan, the range officer, always formal, always addressing her by function rather than name. Copy, she responded simply. That last target needs to be repositioned. Commander wants extreme difficulty today. Move it back another 50. Raven didn't question the order, though she knew it would make the shot virtually impossible in these conditions. Not her concern. She was here to set up targets, not hit them. Acknowledged, she replied, and moved the final plate even farther back, where it disappeared entirely into the morning haze. By the time she returned to the firing line, Master Chief Donovan had arrived and was organizing his paperwork at the observation platform. A barrel-chested man in his early 50s with close-cropped silver hair, he acknowledged her with the barest nod. "Morning, Mercer." "Sir," she responded, keeping her voice neutral. In 8 months, they had exchanged perhaps 200 words total. SEAL team scheduled for 0730, full qualification course. He didn't look up from his clipboard. "They'll need scorecards and win readings." Raven nodded and began preparing the materials. As she worked, unbidden memories flickered through her mind like a stuttering film reel. A medical discharge form with classified stamped across it. A recommendation letter with the signature blacked out. A silver star medal locked away in a footlocker she rarely opened. A life she had stepped away from, for reasons she kept to herself. The SEAL team arrived precisely on schedule, their convoy of vehicles kicking up dust as they pulled into the parking area. 8 men emerged, their camaraderie evident in the easy way they moved together, inside jokes flying between them as they collected their gear. The quiet confidence of men who knew exactly who they were and what they could do. Lieutenant Commander Archer Blackwood led them, a compact man with sharp features and alert eyes that missed nothing. Behind him, Chief Halston, their primary sniper, carried his rifle case with the reverence of a musician handling a priceless instrument. Petty Officer Zuberi followed, the youngest of the group, but already sporting the hardened edge that came from multiple deployments. Raven stood by the equipment table, scorecards prepared, her posture military straight despite her civilian clothes. Old habits again. "Morning, gentlemen," Master Chief Donovan called out as they approached. "Weather report has winds from the northwest, variable 5 to 12 knots. Humidity high with fog in the valley." Blackwood nodded. "Understood. We'll adjust accordingly." He collected his scorecard from Raven without making eye contact, addressing his next question to Donovan as if she weren't there. "How far is the last target?" 1,500 yards, Donovan replied with a slight smile. "Commander wants to see what you boys are made of." "In this soup?" Holston looked toward the distant range, where the last target was completely obscured. "Might as well be shooting at ghosts." "That's why they pay you the big bucks, Chief," Donovan replied with a chuckle. The team moved to the first firing position, and Raven took her place at the scoring table, invisible once more, just how she preferred it. For the next 3 hours, she tracked their progress through the course, marking perfect scores for the first 6 targets. These men were exceptional, even by special operations standards. Their movements were fluid, their communication minimal but effective, their shots consistently accurate, until they reached the final position. One by one, they took their turns at the nearly impossible shot. One by one, they failed to hit the distant plate. The mood darkened with each miss, frustration building in the team that prided itself on meeting every challenge. Zuberi was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "Nobody's hit that damn thing all week, have they?" Donovan's silence was confirmation enough. Halston, with his legendary reputation as the team's best marksman, took his position last. The others grew quiet, giving him the focus he needed. Raven watched as he made minute adjustments to his scope, calculating for wind, distance, and bullet drop with practiced precision. His breathing slowed, his body became perfectly still, and he squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the range. 3 seconds passed in complete silence. No ping, no hit. Halston sat up, the frustration evident in the tight line of his jaw. "Conditions are impossible," he muttered, though it sounded more like an excuse than he probably intended. Raven continued quietly marking scorecards, her eyes occasionally drifting to the distant target. Her fingers moved slightly, unconsciously making calculations based on decades of experience. The wind had shifted subtly since Halston's shot. 2 degrees left, speed dropping to 7 knots. "Something to add, Ms." Commander Blackwood had noticed her distraction. "Mercer," she replied softly. "Just Mercer." Zuberi laughed, the sound sharp with frustration. "What, you think you could do better? Some civilian who's never seen combat?" Raven said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence was often the best response. Explanations led to questions she couldn't answer. But Halston was watching her with unexpected intensity. Something in her posture, the way she'd been tracking the wind, the unconscious calculations her fingers had been making. Recognition flickered in his eyes, though he couldn't quite place it. "Actually," he said slowly, rising to his feet, "I'd like to see you try." The range fell silent. "Halston, what the hell?" Commander Blackwood began, but Halston had already extended his rifle toward Raven. "Here," he said simply. Raven hesitated, looking at the offered weapon. It had been years since she'd held a sniper rifle. Years she'd spent trying to forget the weight of it, the responsibility that came with it, the lives she'd taken through its scope. "That's not necessary," she said quietly. "Humor me," Halston insisted, something in his tone suggesting this was more than a casual request. After another moment's hesitation, she took the rifle. The weight felt familiar in her hands, like greeting an old friend she'd deliberately avoided. She didn't ask permission, didn't check with Donovan. She simply moved to the firing position. The SEALs exchanged glances, some amused, others irritated. Zuberi rolled his eyes. This ought to be good. Raven settled into position with a fluid grace that didn't belong to someone who merely set up targets. She made no adjustments to the scope, requested no wind calls. Her body remembered this, despite her best efforts to forget. The stance, the breathing pattern, the way to become perfectly still, to exist between heartbeats. She inhaled slowly, held it, then released half her breath and froze. The trigger broke cleanly. The shot echoed across the range. 3 seconds passed in complete silence. From the distant valley came the clear, unmistakable ring of a steel plate struck dead center. Holy shit, whispered Zuberi, binoculars frozen halfway to his face. Master Chief Donovan lowered his own binoculars slowly, his expression stunned. Bullseye, perfect hit. The team stared at Raven as she calmly handed the rifle back to Halston, her face carefully neutral despite the rush of adrenaline and memory the shot had triggered. "How did you?" Blackwood began, but stopped as Halston raised his hand. "I knew it," Halston said quietly. "You're Revenant, aren't you?" The name hung in the air like a physical presence. Recognition dawned on several faces. "Revenant?" Zuberi whispered. "The scout sniper from Korengal? The one who held position for 6 days and took out 17 hostiles to cover the evacuation?" Raven said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. Commander Blackwood stepped forward. "That operation is classified. How do you know about it?" "My brother was in that evacuation," Halston said. "Said a ghost saved them, a sniper so good they called them Revenant. Said no one ever knew who it was, just that they disappeared after being wounded." Raven finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "It was a long time ago." Master Chief Donovan tapped at his tablet, accessing restricted files. His eyes widened progressively as he scrolled through information that had been buried for years. "Staff Sergeant Raven Mercer," he read aloud, his voice taking on a different tone entirely. "Scout Sniper, 3 tours, Silver Star recipient." He looked up at her with newfound respect. "Wounded in action, medical discharge after taking shrapnel to save your spotter." He paused. "Record for longest confirmed kill in your unit." The atmosphere on the range had transformed completely. The team stood straighter, their expressions shifting from disbelief to respect. Commander Blackwood studied her face carefully, as if seeing her for the first time. "Why are you here setting up targets instead of training snipers?" Raven's eyes met his, steady and uncompromising. "Some ghosts prefer to stay dead, Commander." Blackwood considered this, then nodded slowly with understanding. He straightened his posture and deliberately raised his hand in a formal salute. One by one, the entire team followed suit, honoring not just her skill, but the sacrifice it represented. Even Zuberi, who had dismissed her most openly, held his salute with perfect form, his expression solemn. Raven hadn't expected this, hadn't wanted it. For months she had been invisible by choice, finding a strange comfort in anonymity after years of being defined by her exceptional abilities. Now, she stood exposed in the morning sunlight, her carefully constructed obscurity shattered by a single shot she should never have taken. She returned their salute crisply, muscle memory taking over once again. The gesture felt both foreign and familiar, like returning to a hometown long abandoned. "At ease," she said quietly, and the team relaxed, though their manner toward her had fundamentally changed. Halston stepped forward. "I never thought I'd meet you. My brother said they never revealed your identity, even after the operation. He still talks about how you saved their platoon." "I was just doing my job," Raven replied, the standard response of someone uncomfortable with recognition. "That was more than a job," Halston countered. 6 days without sleep, limited supplies, in enemy territory taking fire. My brother said the brass tried to award you the Medal of Honor, but the operation was too classified." Raven shook her head slightly. The mission was what mattered, not the recognition. Blackwood was watching her with growing interest. "So you retired after your injury?" "Medical discharge," she corrected. "The shrapnel damaged nerves in my right leg. Military determined I was no longer fit for combat operations." "Yet, you just made a shot that none of us could hit," Zuberi pointed out, respect now evident in his voice. Raven allowed a small shrug. "Shooting was never the problem. 12-mile rucks with 80 pounds of gear became challenging." Master Chief Donovan closed his tablet. "Your file says you were offered positions in training, special operations instruction. You declined." "I did," she confirmed without elaboration. Some truths were still hers to keep. The group fell into an awkward silence, the normal rhythm of the qualification day thoroughly disrupted. Raven began gathering her scoring materials, attempting to restore some normalcy to the situation. "We should complete your qualification report," she said to Blackwood. The commander nodded, though his mind was clearly elsewhere. "Of course." As they finished the administrative requirements, the team continued stealing glances at Raven, reassessing everything about the quiet range assistant they had overlooked for months. By the time they departed, an hour later, the dynamic had shifted irreversibly. She was no longer invisible, the very thing she had been avoiding since arriving at Fort Bragg. The following days proved her concerns valid. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit special operations community. Other teams began appearing at the range, ostensibly for qualification, but clearly curious about the legendary Revenant who had been hiding in plain sight. Instructors from the sniper school made thinly veiled inquiries about consulting opportunities. Even the base commander made an unexpected visit, claiming he was just checking on range operations. Raven responded to the attention by becoming even more reserved, speaking only when necessary, arriving earlier and leaving later to avoid interactions. But she couldn't escape the changed way people looked at her. The respect was almost worse than the previous invisibility, carrying with it expectations she had no interest in fulfilling. A week after the incident, she arrived at the range to find Commander Blackwood waiting alone beside her equipment shed. His presence at this early hour was unexpected and concerning. "Commander," she acknowledged with a nod, unlocking the shed without breaking her routine. "Sergeant Mercer," he replied formally. "Just Mercer is fine," she corrected, loading targets onto her utility cart. "I left the rank behind." Blackwood watched her work for a moment. "Did you?" The question hung between them as Raven continued her preparations. Finally, she stopped and faced him directly. "Why are you here, Commander?" "We have a situation," he said without preamble. "Hostage rescue operation. Extremely difficult shot required under complex conditions. Command wants our best." He handed her a folder. "They want you, not as range staff, as our primary sniper." Raven stared at the offered folder without taking it. "I'm not active duty anymore." "Special consultant status, your choice." Blackwood's expression softened slightly. "But we need someone who can make that shot." Before she could respond, the sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted them. Chief Halston emerged from a Humvee, walking toward them with purpose. "Sergeant Mercer," he greeted her. "Good morning." "You're in on this too?" she asked, gesturing toward the folder still in Blackwood's hand. Halston nodded. "The team requested you specifically." "Why?" The question came out more sharply than she intended. "Because sometimes the mission is more important than protocols or comfort zones," Halston replied evenly. "You taught me that, even if you don't remember." Raven's expression showed confusion. "Wardak Province, 2018, Halston explained. "You were assigned to our unit temporarily. I was a new sniper, nervous about my first combat deployment. You told me that when the moment came, training would take over, and the mission would matter more than my fear." Recognition flickered in Raven's eyes. "I remember. You were just a kid." "I was 22, Halston said with a slight smile. "But yes, just a kid. Your advice saved my life 3 weeks later when our position was compromised." He gestured to the folder. "Now, I'm returning the favor." Raven hesitated, then finally took the folder. She opened it, scanning the mission parameters with practiced efficiency. The operation involved a hostage situation. American diplomatic personnel held by extremists in a compound with limited access points. The only viable solution involved a precision shot at extreme range through challenging environmental conditions with no room for error. "The hostages will be executed tomorrow if demands aren't met," Blackwood explained. "We deploy in 6 hours." Raven closed the folder. "There are other snipers." "Not like you," Halston said simply. "I've been out of the game for years," she countered. "That shot last week suggests otherwise," Blackwood replied. Raven turned away, staring out across the misty range. The sun was just beginning to burn through the fog, revealing the distant targets she had placed countless times. For years, she had been running from who she was, what she could do, the responsibility that came with her gift, the weight of lives taken and saved through her scope. "Why did you really leave?" Halston asked quietly. "The injury wasn't career-ending, not for someone with your skills." Raven remained silent for a long moment. "Korengal was my third tour," she finally said. 17 confirmed kills in 6 days, each one necessary to protect those men, each one justified. She turned back to face them. "But afterward I couldn't sleep, couldn't separate the faces. The line between necessity and something darker started to blur." Understanding dawned in their expressions. "So, when the medical discharge came after my injury, I took it. she continued. Found a place where I could still serve in some small way, without having to make those calls anymore. Blackwood nodded slowly. That's your choice to make, but right now, there are 3 diplomatic personnel, including 2 women, who may not have the luxury of moral contemplation by this time tomorrow. The shot is nearly impossible, Raven said, tapping the folder. Even for me. Nearly impossible isn't the same as impossible, Halston replied. You proved that last week. Raven looked between the 2 men, recognizing the respect in their eyes, but also the determination. They wouldn't have come if they weren't certain she was the only option. If I do this, she said carefully, it's 1 mission, 1 shot. Then I come back here and return to being invisible. No recognition, no reports identifying me, no pressure to continue. Agreed, Blackwood said immediately. As far as official records are concerned, the shot will be attributed to our team's sniper. He glanced at Halston, who nodded in confirmation. Just Raven is fine, she said quietly, the beginning of acceptance in her voice. For the first time since they'd met her, a small smile crossed her face. It transformed her, revealing the person who had been hiding beneath a carefully constructed anonymity. When do we start? Now, Blackwood replied. Gear's already prepared. Aircraft is standing by. As they walked toward the waiting vehicles, Raven felt a familiar tension return to her shoulders, the hyper-awareness of someone stepping back into a world of fine margins and fatal consequences. Yet alongside it came something she hadn't expected, a sense of purpose that had been missing from her days of setting up targets for others to hit. Some ghosts, it seemed, weren't meant to stay dead after all. 3 months later, Raven stood at the back of a secure briefing room at Fort Bragg, watching as Commander Blackwood addressed his team. She wore the same tactical uniform as the others now, though without rank insignia. The only distinction was the custom rifle case leaning against the wall beside her, equipment she had once sworn never to use again. Operation Nightfall was a complete success, Blackwood was saying, his voice carrying authority and satisfaction. All hostages extracted without casualties, primary targets neutralized, intelligence objectives secured. He paused, looking directly at Raven. None of which would have been possible without exceptional marksmanship under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The team nodded in agreement, several glancing her way with the expressions of respect. Even Zuberi, who had been the most skeptical initially, now regarded her as an essential part of their unit. Command has taken notice, Blackwood continued, which is why we have a visitor today. The door opened and a rear admiral entered the room. The team immediately stood at attention. Raven followed suit, old habits resurfacing despite her civilian status. At ease, the admiral said, moving to the front of the room. I won't take much of your time. This kind of work doesn't get public recognition, as you all know too well. The operations you conduct remain classified, the lives you save unaware of your existence. He produced a small case from his pocket. But that doesn't mean your exceptional service goes unnoticed. The admiral approached Raven, opening the case to reveal a commendation medal. Ms. Mercer, your actions during Operation Nightfall demonstrated the highest levels of skill, courage, and dedication. While the details must remain classified, please accept this as a token of our appreciation. Raven stood perfectly still as he pinned the medal to her uniform. She had received commendations before, but this one felt different, earned not as a soldier following orders, but as someone who had chosen to step back into the darkness when needed. The details of your operation remain classified, the admiral stated formally, but the impact will not be forgotten. After the brief ceremony, the team gathered outside the building. The dynamic had shifted dramatically from that first day on the range, where once they had looked past her, now they included her in their casual conversation and inside jokes. Where once she had been background, now she was essential. Command offered me another sniper for next month's operation, Blackwood mentioned as they walked toward the waiting vehicles. I told them we already have the best. Raven walked with a different posture now, not hiding, not invisible, but present and acknowledged. The weight she had carried since Korangal seemed lighter somehow. Not gone, she would always bear those memories, but balanced by a renewed sense of purpose. I'll be there, she said simply. That single mission had turned into another, and then another. Each operation carefully selected, each shot necessary to save lives rather than simply take them. The distinction mattered to Raven. She had established clear boundaries with command, accepting only missions where her unique skills could prevent casualties, never those where she would be merely another weapon in the arsenal. Halston fell into step beside her as they approached the helicopter pad. "Remember that first day, when you hit the target none of us could touch?" "You were the only one who saw something," Raven replied. "What gave me away?" Halston smiled. "Your hands. When you were scoring our targets, your fingers were making micro-adjustments for wind conditions. Only someone with thousands of hours behind a scope does that unconsciously." "Observant," she acknowledged. "Had to be. Learned from the best." He gestured toward the helicopter. "Ready for this one? Conditions might be worse than nightfall." Raven nodded, feeling none of the reluctance that had plagued her 3 months ago. "I've been studying the environment reports. The crosswinds will be challenging, but manageable." As they boarded the helicopter, Zuberi secured her rifle case with careful reverence, a far cry from his dismissive attitude during their first encounter. "Still can't believe you spent 8 months just setting up our targets," he said, shaking his head. "All that talent wasted." "It wasn't wasted," Raven corrected him. "It was healing." Zuberi considered this, then nodded with unexpected understanding. "Fair enough, everyone needs time to recalibrate." The helicopter lifted off, carrying them toward another mission where lives hung in the balance. As the base grew smaller below them, Raven reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. She had sought anonymity, trying to escape who she was. Instead, she had found a way to embrace her abilities without losing herself in the process. That pivotal day on the range had forced her to confront a truth she had been avoiding. Her gift came with responsibility, one she couldn't simply set aside, but now she carried it on her own terms, with clear boundaries and purpose. Blackwood caught her eye from across the helicopter cabin, giving her a nod that conveyed both respect and understanding. He had kept his word, ensuring her involvement remained officially unacknowledged. The mission reports listed Halston as the primary sniper, with Raven identified only as a tactical consultant. Her name never appeared in briefings to higher command. The arrangement suited her perfectly. She had no interest in medals or recognition. The quiet acknowledgement of her team was enough, along with the knowledge that her skills were being used to protect rather than simply destroy. The helicopter banked sharply, beginning its approach to the forward operating base, where they would stage for the coming operation. Below them, the landscape unfolded in shades of brown and green, reminiscent of so many other deployments in her past. Yet, this time felt fundamentally different. 2-minute warning, the pilot announced over the intercom. Raven checked her equipment one final time, the routine both comforting and familiar. She caught Halston watching her with a slight smile. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking about how things change," he replied. 3 months ago, you were dead set on remaining invisible. Now, look at you." "Still prefer to remain in the background," she reminded him. "Background maybe, invisible, no period." He gestured toward the rest of the team. "You're part of this unit now, whether you want it to be or not." Raven glanced around at the men she had come to rely on, who in turn relied on her. Zuberi checking his medical kit with practiced efficiency. Blackwood reviewing mission parameters on his tablet. The others preparing equipment and weapons with the quiet focus of professionals. She had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than herself, to belong to a team that valued not just what she could do, but who she was. The helicopter touched down, kicking up swirls of dust that temporarily obscured the view outside. As the rotors slowed, the team prepared to disembark, moving with the coordinated precision that came from months of working together. "Mercer," Blackwood called over the diminishing rotor noise. "You're up first. Find us a position with the sightlines we need." She nodded, accepting the responsibility without hesitation. 3 months ago, such trust would have felt like a burden. Now, it felt like recognition of her true self, the person she had tried to bury beneath the quiet routine of range management. As they moved out across the terrain, Raven took point, scanning the environment not just for threats, but for the optimal position from which to accomplish their mission. The weight of her rifle across her back was no longer a reminder of lives taken, but of lives that would be saved. The distinction had made all the difference. Hours later, as the sun began to set, she lay perfectly still on a rocky outcropping, her body molded to the uneven surface as if she were part of the landscape itself. Through her scope, she could see the target location nearly 2 kilometers away. a distance that would challenge even the most sophisticated equipment and experienced marksman. Halston lay beside her, serving as her spotter, a reversal of their positions from that day on the range. "Wind shifting," he murmured. 3 o'clock, 8 knots. Raven made the minute adjustment without comment. They had developed an efficient shorthand over the past months, needing few words to communicate essential information. Through the scope, she could see the hostages being moved into position, the tangible results of intelligence they had helped gather during previous operations. Everything hinged on the shot she was about to take, a precision strike that would initiate the larger rescue operation. "Target confirmed," Halston whispered. "Green light from command." Raven took a slow breath, centering herself completely. The familiar calm descended, the world narrowing to just her, the rifle, and the target. No doubts, no hesitation. Just absolute focus and certainty. "Sending it," she replied softly, and squeezed the trigger. The shot broke the evening stillness, the sound rolling across the valley like distant thunder. Through her scope, Raven watched as the primary target dropped, creating the precise diversion needed for the extraction team to move in. Within seconds, the operation was in full motion, each element executing their role in the carefully choreographed rescue. "Perfect shot," Halston confirmed unnecessarily. They both had seen the impact. Raven allowed herself a small smile, not of satisfaction in taking a life, but in knowing the hostages would soon be safe. That was the difference she had needed to find, the purpose that gave meaning to her exceptional abilities. Hours later, back at the forward operating base, the team celebrated the successful mission with the quiet reserve of professionals who understood both the importance and the cost of what they did. No wild displays, no boasting, just the subtle acknowledgement between people who had faced danger together and emerged victorious. Commander Blackwood approached Raven as she cleaned her rifle, a task she performed with methodical care. "Command sent congratulations," he informed her. "The intelligence we recovered will prevent at least 3 planned attacks." She nodded, continuing her work. The acknowledgement was enough, far better than medals or public recognition she had no interest in receiving. "They're asking for you specifically for the next operation," Blackwood added. "Your reputation is growing, at least within certain circles." "As long as it stays within those circles," she replied, reassembling her weapon with practiced ease. Blackwood smiled. "The ghost remains a ghost, just one that occasionally materializes when needed most." Raven finished with her rifle and looked up at him. "I can live with that." She had found her balance at last, between the extraordinary skills she possessed and the ordinary life she had sought. Not hiding from who she was, but channeling her abilities toward a purpose she could embrace without reservation. The quiet range assistant still existed, but now alongside the exceptional sniper, who emerged when lives hung in the balance. Some people, she had learned, were simply meant for extraordinary things, even when they tried to escape them. The key was finding the right reason, the right team, the right mission. She had found all 3.